everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to paint this super easy landscape watercolour piece, and this is all part of my watercolour painting series, so make sure you check all of them videos out to learn how to create beautiful Japanese inspired landscapes with me. And let's get straight to the video. To begin with, for this painting I created 3 different shades of green, and this was due to the amount of shadows needed for the bushes in the centre of the painting. I created a really nice vibrant bright green. I just used a nice earthy green, more of a cold green. If you don't have a cold green, use an earthy green and add a little hint of blue. And then to finish, I mixed some brown with a bright earthy green, so it was a little bit more on the green side but still very cold and dark. And all I did with these 3 colours was follow the outline that I've already created and add in dots to replicate all of the shadows in the distinctive areas. So I went in with that really nice cold green to begin with, and I followed all of the natural shadows. Anywhere that was really dark though, I left that there for now. Most of the shadow was towards the right hand side, I would say, for this green. Also note that there's quite a bit of negative space even where I am adding the dots, so my aim isn't to completely fill an area. It's just to map in where the general dark and light colours go to begin with. Then I went in with that nice earthy green, added that down, same thing with the little dots. I wasn't too worried about the negative space being left. And then I went in with the really dark green and added in all of them shadows, and there's actually quite a lot of shadows needed throughout this section we're working on at the minute, more towards the bottom where you've got that wall below in the reference photo. So it's mapping everything into the correct area and then going back in with all the different colours, keep building the layers and filling all of that space in. And because we've allowed a little bit of drying time between each colour, and by that I mean working from one side to the other and then coming back to that other side we began with, the overlap is going to be really distinctive and you're going to be able to see the texture come to life for the bushes. Otherwise we'd go straight in and just add the colour down, but putting in the dots means that you're going to have that natural texture created. And that's how simple it is to create this section of the painting. It looks like there's a lot of colour and combination going on, but you can create the bushes with just these 3 simple colours. And then once you're happy with this, we can move on to creating that lake. And instead of creating different colours like we usually would, like nice rich blues, crystal clear waters, there's actually a lot of green involved in this, and I think that's heavily due to the reflection created, but it still gives the illusion of very beautiful water. It doesn't look dirty or anything like that. I think the reference photo is a really good way to understand colour a bit more and not just assume that everything is going to look a certain way and be a certain colour, as I didn't use any blue in the water at all actually. I did just use the greens and some grey, and I used the wet in wet method to create this section of the painting. So I added a light layer of water down using a bigger brush just to move the water across the page a little bit easier, and I added a little bit of each of the greens that we've just used to get that colour in there, and then blended it out. And I used horizontal brush strokes to do this, as I think this helps create the illusion of water. You can see the general movement of paint, so to move it from left to right or right to left is a really good way to help with that initial illusion that we're trying to create. I added a lot more of that earthy green with the brown towards the top, and then more of the bright vibrant green towards the bottom, although there was a colour combination throughout, so I did use all of the colours, just more and less of certain ones. And when I got to that earthy green colour, I did blend it out, as if you look at the reference photo, it does get a lot lighter towards the bottom of the page where that water is. So to blend that out using the wet in wet method was really simple. You've just got to drag it across the page really, while still using the horizontal strokes and just moving slightly down towards the bottom of the page each time you go across. And once I was happy with that initial base layer of colour, I actually mixed another little bit of green. So I created the same colour with the earthy green, but added a little bit of grey to this. And the reason I added a little bit of grey was just to mute it down a little bit. I didn't want it to be as vibrant as obviously the bushes at the top, as this is still water, so it is usually a little bit cold bolder and a little bit more transparent, and I think the grey really helps to achieve that. And using this colour I've just pre-mixed, I use this to add the detail. So because the water's dried a lot now with all of the layers of colour that I've added, going in and adding this is a lot simpler. The wetter the paper, the more it's going to bleed out, the harder it will then be to add detail. So I scraped off all the excess paint, so I just had a little bit on my brush, and I use this again using the horizontal strokes to add detail using the tip of the paintbrush this time though, not the flat sides. I really wanted the small detail in there, so kind of hovering it above the page and then going in and adding these little lines is the best way to do that, as you're going to have the point of the paintbrush touching the paper instead of anything else. And I just worked these in horizontally, very consistently, all the way through that lake section. Looking in the reference photo, if any areas were a little bit darker, I then went in with a grey that I pre-mixed. So to create the grey, I mixed black and white and added a little bit of water to this, and I used this to go through all of the dark sections towards the top and the right hand side of this lake section. So you've got that consistency in terms of shadow, and then it gets lighter where that green section falls. Once I was happy with the lake, I then created a really dark brown, mixing brown with a tiny bit of blue to deepen it that little bit further, and I used this to paint in the wall that is separating that green section from the lake. Really simple to do this. You want that nice controlled brush stroke for the outer edges so that you've got that nice clean straight line, but really simple to paint this in. And then using the same dark brown, I used this to paint in the branches that I've mapped in again with the outline. This is going to really help with this, and this is a really good way to practice thin brush strokes. You want to get these as thin as possible, mapping them all in, following the reference photo, following the outline to make sure you get it in the right place. I would say on the right hand side they're definitely coming out of the page that little bit more, and then as you come more towards the middle section they point downwards or upwards that little bit more, and then on the left hand side they're more of that horizontal angle again. So it does differentiate across the whole of this landscape where the branches actually move towards and from, but I think it's really nice the way that they do that, as it really shapes the rest of the actual landscape piece. And then I actually went in with the grey that we'd used throughout the lake section, and I used this to paint in a few more branches so that it's just a little bit more realistic in terms of the shadows and colours, as all of the branches, yes they are quite dark, but you will have that variation between everything. You will have darker sections, lighter sections, and that is included within the branches, so I think it's important to have that variation of the colours. Whilst this is then drying, you can get into painting the people and the boats, which can be very tricky as they are really small. This is A4 paper that I'm working on, and they were really tiny just from the outline that I printed, but you could go in and paint a very basic silhouette with a dark colour like a black or brown, something that matched up to everything else going on if you wanted to in terms of the shadow, but you don't have to add in the detail like I did if that's just a little bit too much, that little bit of an extra step. But you can go in like I did with the dark brown that we already had mixed, and I use this for all of the dark areas, a lot of the silhouette, the hair, the bottom of the boats. I also created a nice muted yellow, and I use this to paint in the shirt that the guy was wearing in the middle section, a little bit of red for the bottom of the boat on the left hand side, a little bit of blue for the bottom of the boat on the middle boat. Lots of different variations of colour. I think the yellow and the red was a really nice difference to the rest of the painting, which so far has really just been green, and you're just filling in the blanks basically with these colours. You can mix up the colours if you wanted to. You could paint a really bright pink boat, really bright purple, dark, anything you want really. And you can also go in if again it's too stressful painting them in because of the detail and them being quite small. Could use pencils or pens, anything like that to get this silhouette down, and I think this just ties everything together really nicely. I then created another grey. This time I added far more white and also a lot more water to make it as light as possible. The water lightens, the white is more to actually change the colour, so it made it a little bit colder, a little bit more of what I wanted to blend into the white that takes over this painting for the blossoms. And again, following the outlines provided, I used this grey more towards the bottom of the blossoms actually, and added in all of the shadows as per the reference photo and also the outlines. So where there was more shadows, I added more of this grey closer together with the dots and made sure to get it down in all of the right areas. But also I added a few dots throughout the whole section, as there is a lot of white going on within this area, so you want more of the different colours to make the white stand out later on, as if you just go straight in with white, you're not going to be able to see anything else. It's all just going to be the same colour, there's going to be no blend within different colours. You're not going to be able to notice really that there actually are blossoms there, it's just going to look like branches. I also added a little bit of a nice yellow to get that colour combination right. There's just a hint of it, I would say, within the reference photo. And then I used some white acrylic paint and dotted this down throughout the whole of the blossom section, slightly over some of the grey, blending it all together, going into as well some of the green. I think it sits really nicely on top of the green, especially if you don't have that much on your paintbrush. You've got like the little dots that just slightly creep over. I think it looks really nice sitting on top of that. And then I just dotted this throughout, going over some of the branches, some areas more than others to blend together, and got that light layer down. And then after this I went back in with the grey just to get the colour balance right, and this can be quite difficult, and it did take me a little while longer than I anticipated to get that colour combination between all of this right. I think because it's white it's that little bit more difficult, so if you're struggling with this you could go in with maybe some pink, as blossoms are a lot of the time pink as well. I also added a little bit of green back through, as you don't want it to go from green straight up to the white. You will have some of that green creeping back through, pushing out from the cherry blossoms where there's a little bit of the gap. And I also went back in with some brown, as I think I lost mine a little bit, and then back in with some white acrylic just to blend it. So it was just finding that balance between all of the different colours, and I played around a lot with that grey, adding in them shadows and making sure that the balance was definitely there and everything blended really nicely together. And then to finish this landscape painting, I added a light layer of water around all of the edges and dotted all the colours I've used today into this area. And the water that I'd added down is going to create a really natural blend out, and I think adding all of these colours just ties everything together. And I think in particular the red and yellow dotted down just does something a little bit special to the painting. I think it gives it a bit more depth and that colour variation, and I really love the way this turned out. And that's how I created this really easy watercolour landscape. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you have, please don't forget to like, subscribe and comment for more nature art content. I'll see you all next time for another landscape painting. Bye guys!